Hello, hello. You're tuning into the Careering with Cameron podcast, your safe place to ask all the dumb questions about finding a job. Hey everybody, it's Kevin Cameron with Careering with Cameron, and we have quite the show for you today. I am joined by Jeremy Schifeling of the Job Insiders, and he is going to share with us a little bit about what's going on in this crazy world and how to feel better in terms of the job search and putting all this stuff together. So we'll cover all the usual suspects, a little bit of AI in there, some job search, some feel better, some like how do you keep it all together on the way. So with that said, let's get into this. Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me on, Kevin.
Good. So bring me up to speed in terms of the Job Insiders. Like, what do you focus on in terms of helping people?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey because I actually got my start as a kindergarten teacher of all things. And I actually realized that I was a terrible teacher, but I love to help people sort of find opportunity and build that path for themselves.
That's awesome.
That led me to LinkedIn, that led me to work for Khan Academy. And now I help students and career coaches around the world use AI and LinkedIn to really find that next path. So just because I'm always curious when people have a pivot that they enter into, right? Especially coming from teaching is a pretty significant one. What was that moment for you that you said like, all right, I'm going to go a full 90 here and go a different direction? Yeah, this is so important, especially for new grads or career changers out there, is just because you had a certain major, you're a bio major or a CS major, doesn't mean that has to be the rest of your life. In my case, I had studied education. I was passionate about it. But then when I got into the classroom, I just realized I wasn't that guy. I didn't have the patience to run after 25 five-year-olds. But what I really loved was working on the classroom blog and creating slideshows and all this other cool stuff. And that kind of epiphany, that light bulb moment, if you will, said, hey, it's okay to suck at something. If you know what you're really good at, play to those strengths. And so that is something that I encourage for everyone. Don't be bound by your diploma. Find out who you truly are.
That's such a great point. And, it's interesting as a culture / society. I think we are used to the like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, when you're 5 and you say a firefighter or a policeman or a pilot, that's fun. But when you get to like 18, 19, 22, and you get that question, the fear that runs through your body, right? Because you've invested in this path and now you must follow this path. I was an accountant coming through school, and I was in a kind of a different shift, very, very good at scheduling happy hour, which was an indication that maybe accounting was not necessarily my calling. And it was pointed out to me, and that helped to kind of complete the pivot. But, what are you seeing today? Like the people that you're working with, there's a whole lot of questions, a whole lot of fear, a whole lot of unknowns. What are you hearing the most at this point?
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head there, Kevin, which is there's a sense that the rug has been pulled out from underneath the next generation. They've been told all their lives, work really hard, get good grades, you'll have a great life. And now here they are on the precipice, walking across that graduation stage, and there are no jobs, and they're not even sure what that life is going to look like. So here's what I say, and this goes back to what you were just mentioning. We do a terrible job as a society educating our students on what the jobs of the world really are. We have 70% of like Gen Z saying they want to be influencers, not because they actually want to be influencers, but because they just don't know what else is out there. And so my challenge for folks who are graduating or about to graduate is go to AI and just say, hey, here are my strengths. Here are my passions. What are 10 job titles that would be a good fit? And you'll discover jobs you didn't even know existed, but that would fit you to a T. So fight back against the world that's focused you on calculus and periodic tables. Focus on what really matters, which is who you are in the world.
That's such a great point. I think AI is an incredible resource. I think where we get into trouble is when AI is our solution. And so, using it as a resource in that way to help really kind of scope and frame what are we going to do next is important. We're going off script here a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about this as well, because I think this is a next really natural fit for this. Can we talk to the parents of those folks for a second? Because when you're leading a young adult across that stage, and you're thinking like this is the next stop for you, and so, for some, I genuinely believe they've known what they want it to be their whole career. What do we tell the parents whose kid is like, I don't know what I want to do? Like, can we help them?
Yeah, so important, Kevin, because I do think so much of the pressure and the anxiety is not just falling on the student's shoulders, but also on the parents. And I say
Yes.
that as a parent myself. And I
Yes.
think the reality is that we were lucky, whether you're Gen Z, whether you're Gen X or millennial or baby boomer, we graduated into an economy that, yes, maybe was in a recession or in a tough time, but at least it was similar to the economy that we grew up in.
Hmm.
And now all of a sudden, everything is changing so fast, and no one's really ready for this. And so I think the trick is to sort of take that deep breath and say, you know what? It doesn't matter what's happened in the past. It doesn't matter if my kid, spent their entire year, 18 years of life focusing on becoming a computer programmer. Let's just see what they're genuinely excited about, what people are genuinely hiring for, and then bring those things together. And I think if we could just focus on that future, as opposed to being enslaved to the past and our preconceptions about what our kids need to be circa 2020, I think we're a lot more free to throw off that pressure and that anxiety that shackles us all.
Mm-hmm. And I think, one of the areas where I'm going to say there's a probably a pretty significant change from the generations that are in the workforce now is that the generation that is at this point about to leave the workforce had some different priorities than the ones that are coming in now. And also, they're the same people who are asking the question, what are you going to do next now that you've graduated, right? So where are we with that? Like, how is this going to work?
Yeah. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here, Kevin.
Let's do it.
Because I know Gen Z gets dunked on a lot.
Yep.
Just as millennials got dunked on and Gen Xers got dunked on and baby boomers by the greatest generation parents. That being said, I think that what we have in common is way bigger than what divides us. And if you think about what anyone in Gen Z wants, even if they got addicted to their phones in the crib and have grown up in this digital bubble that's messed them up, at the end of the day, they want to be with people. They want to do things that are meaningful. They want to have purpose in life. And so I think we've got to come back to those core principles and say, hey, how do we develop a future and a workplace that gives them as a chance to be their best humans, not just the best cogs in the machine? And it's funny, there's still this idea of like, oh, everything's got to be hybrid and work from home and all of that. Well, if I'm 21 years old, I don't want to work from home in my tiny little apartment. I want to be out there meeting people, building the relationships that build the next stage of my life. I think that's never changed.
Very true. Very true. And I love that example specifically because the other piece of it is, and we heard a lot of this going through COVID, especially when we were home more with our families. My kid's always on the phone. They're always on device. It's nonstop. And what was interesting about that was that socially, they were connecting at a much faster level than the folks who weren't, the folks who were not texting or on social media or whatnot. And so it really made a very powerful statement in terms of they are socializing. They're socializing faster and probably better than you are without those devices. And so that's just how they're doing it. And so maybe it's not so much that they have to catch up. Maybe it's that the other group has to figure out how to do it. So it is interesting. I love that you brought that to light in terms of looking at it from all dimensions, not just from one. So in terms of the job front, how I know we can take what we're good at and enter it into AI and kind of figure out what jobs are available that are there. One that I hear an awful lot and is a challenge from parents mostly is, but they're not going to be able to move out because they're not going to make enough money to be able to afford an apartment and. And so I do think that we do owe it to our parents and to our students who are out there listening. Let's kind of dig into that. So
We can go into a whole other podcast, Kevin, about housing policy in this country, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Imagine. Yeah.
How is our generation screwed over the next generation in terms of building and all that? But that's a separate talk show.
Yeah.
I think the reality is that's a real consideration. However, I'm going to just say this right now. As someone who grew up in Buffalo, New York, again, a city that got dunked on, kind of the Gen Z of cities, I say, wait, maybe you can't afford $5,000 a month for a studio in Manhattan or San Francisco, but $5,000 will buy you an entire year's worth of rent in Buffalo. And there's a ton of Gen Zers who are moving in. And so maybe the question that you're asking AI these days is not just what's the job, but what's the location that gives me the life I want? And there's a lot of discussion right now about these like B tier or C tier cities that are basically rolling out the red carpet. I think Tulsa, Oklahoma is paying you $10,000 just to move there for a couple of years. And you now have a chance to build not just a great life and a great career, but even maybe home equity in your home because you were able to afford it as a young person. So I think, again, expanding our horizons beyond the usual suspects doesn't just apply to jobs.
It's interesting. That's not even just a American component. Like that is a worldwide component of countries that are rolling out the red carpet to say, take this job here, do this research, and we will take care of you for the next 2 to 5 years so that financially you're comfortable. Like, why not? So that's a great point is, you know, where is that job for me based on what my needs are? So what would be the cheat sheet that you would work with somebody on to kind of feel like they have some structure, right? So not to be like closed in, but maybe just to feel like I can breathe because I kind of have a plan. Like, where would you start?
Yeah, I'm totally the same way. Like, I don't believe in the idea that you have to script out your entire life, but I think just emotionally, psychologically, knowing that you have a little scaffold there, you're not just floating in space.
Right.
That's so supportive. So what I would say, just to add some meat to the bones of our structure before, is that when you're doing this analysis on AI, don't feel like you just got to pull things out of the ether. Like, what are my skills? What are my passions? I don't know. I'm 21 years old. Instead, lean upon this third party effect where other people tend to know us better than we know ourselves. So, for example, you can come in, upload your performance evaluation from your internship, your report card, your letters of recommendation from your faculty, and say, hey, scan through all of these things, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. What are my top 5 strengths that others see in me that I don't necessarily see in myself? And if you are as dedicated a user of ChatGPT as most of Gen Z is, you now have this long memory where it says, hey, you keep coming back to this questions around space or questions around cell biology or whatever it is. These are clearly important things that burn inside you. If you can start to understand what drives you, what you're strong at, now you have the best chance of really focusing on a job that truly matches you. And then once you know the job is really interesting, now it's time to get out of the building. I know this is scary, especially for a generation, like you said, that was raised on phones. But if you could meet with someone who went to your alma mater, and again, this is the power of college in America.
Yes.
If you are a Spartan or a Trojan or a Wolverine, you are that for life. And anyone else in that network is obligated to talk to you because someone who is older than them paid it forward to them. You can learn about these roles not just by talking to ChatGPT, but by talking to the people who are actually doing it. And if you follow those 3 steps of figuring out who you are, connecting it to a job title, learning from the people who are doing it, you are already ahead of 99% of people in your generation who are just applying online for random stuff, not even knowing why they're doing it.
Huge point. So the challenge around I can't find a job is because we're one of 7 million applying to the same job, and we're no different. The component of reaching out to alumni from your university or college or even high school, honestly, is such a huge advantage to get somebody who's going to pay attention. They're going to listen to you. They want to help you. They would love nothing more than to mentor you into this type of a role. And they feel as though, sometimes I use the analogy of like when you go into shopping online and you're trying to figure out which product is the best one for you, you're going to look at the stars on that product, right? The reviews is what you're looking at. when you have that common ground, you automatically have at least 4 stars because they already are like, if I got into this university or college, I know who I am. This person must be very similar. I would love to help them. And so, that's, I think, really important. And I think that we forget that. We forget that there are places to find some common conversation starters and find them very easily and be able to move forward with them. What's the approach that you coach on like for that? Like, how do they get started with that conversation?
Yeah. So here's the big mistake that a lot of folks make. They've been told by their career coaches, you got to talk to alumni. You got to get referrals. Okay, I'm on a mission. I'm going to reach out. And they send them a message that maybe they learned about from TikTok that's like, I'm a fellow Trojan. I'm a fellow Spartan. I really want to get a job at your company. Can you help me get that job? And already you failed the test because you took what was a relational, almost nostalgic connection between the alum and the next generation, and you turned it into a transaction, a sales job. And no one wants to be sold, even by a student from their own alma mater. And so as a result, you got to flip that around. You got to come back to human core principles, which are, what does this person actually want? What do they care about? And I will tell you, as a certified old guy myself, the one thing I want to feel is I want to feel valuable to the next generation. I don't want to feel old and useless. And so if you reach out based on curiosity, Jeremy, tell me about your career. How did you launch it? What can I learn from you? That is catnip to any alum in a way deeper way than, hey, how can I get a job at your company?
So it's so funny. I think once you learn that skill, it's so easy to use. But it is a very fearful endeavor, I'll call it, as a fellow old guy, which I will steal from your conversation. The challenge is, and I know going back, thinking about it myself, I was not anywhere near about ready to reach out to somebody who was in the C-suite of an organization and say, hey, we both took the same classes probably in the same building. I'd love to talk to you about how you got to where you are. But I would imagine the interesting part of that is how many people do that.
Yes,
right?
Kevin, I just want to just like ding, ding, ding here, because here's what I noticed. Maybe you saw this in your own career. When I was a young gun coming out of college and then grad school, I got hit up all the time. Hey, Jeremy, how'd you get that job at LinkedIn or Google or wherever I was working? But then as soon as I became a manager and a director and a muckety muck, all of a sudden, all that outreach stopped.
Yep.
Even though I had way more power to ultimately reach out and say, hey, you're getting an interview. You're getting an opportunity at my organization. And of course, exactly like you said, Kevin, it all comes down to this calculation of, man, that person's too powerful. They're too scary. I'm not going to reach out. And if everyone's thinking the same way, that's your opportunity as the brave person who's got the guts to actually engage that senior leader.
100%. And also, as you put it, being able to reach out to them and show them that they are valuable, that you appreciate what they've done with their career. You don't have to say that, but just that you're doing the outreach to say, wow, you've really done a lot with your career. I would love to know how you did that. Who doesn't want to hear that? I would argue that probably even people that are like 1 to 2 years into their career are like, sure, I'll talk to you about it. Why not? Absolutely. So that's really important. I think the other piece of this that's important is who does that outreach?
Yeah.
Right? So this is not something that you want somebody else to do the outreach for you. Okay. Frankly, I know mom and dad are here. They're listening. They're like, I'm going to help my kid along. I'm going to get them all set up with these interviews. I'm going to send out some messages to my friends. And that's great from a support perspective. But I would guess, and I'm asking Jeremy on this topic, is it more impressive or less impressive when the parent reaches out instead of the student?
Yeah, it does create a little bit of an awkward dynamic. What was going to be a dynamic duo is now a weird threesome.
Yes.
But also think about this, and this is the way I always thought about it as a career coach at University of Michigan, is like I could introduce my students to all these people in my network, no problem. But then a year from now, they're going to be out there looking for their next job, and I'm not going to be sitting next to them. And we really have to teach these skills, not as something you use once in a while, but as skills you could be using every day for the rest of your life if you develop them early on. So I know it's so cliched, but please do not give your kids a fried fish dinner when you could be teaching them to fish themselves.
Yes, exactly. Let them do it, support them, but let them do it and figure it out. Because I do think that is where the conversation comes from, which is, why are they not moving out of my house? Because you provide the house and the fish dinner. So let's figure out how to help them and help them develop those skills. And I would also argue that having the confidence to do that type of outreach and conversation will affect every single part of their life. Like, why not?
Yeah, I'll just say right now, people listening to this might say, wow, this is easy for Jeremy, easy for Kevin. They're these super extroverted movers and shakers. Well, I'm an introvert and I'm a nerd.
Yes.
And I only feel confident today because I learned from doing these things for the last 20 years. Getting rejected, getting over it, getting stronger. Mm-hmm. We got to build that muscle memory for our kids, not by talking to them about it, but by having them experience it themselves.
Yes. Do what scares you. Yes. That's what we build. Absolutely. Tell us, Jeremy, tell us a little bit more about Job Insiders. How do you guys work? What do you do? Bring us up to speed.
Yeah. So basically, we work with about 400 universities around the world that have said, hey, we want our students to have great resumes, great cover letters, just like they did 50 years ago.
Yep.
But we also want them to have great LinkedIn profiles, great AI strategies. And so basically, we're bringing the schools and their students into that next generation.
Awesome. So in terms of how do you work with the universities and students, are you working through the university or working directly with the students? Like who approaches you and how do they approach you?
Yeah, so mostly through the universities.
Okay.
If anyone out there hears it just as an individual student or family, you can always reach out as well.
All right.
But yeah, I think the biggest thing is none of this stuff is rocket science. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be like, oh, I've got this secret formula for finding a job that no one else knows. But I want to take the stuff that seems scary, if obvious, and make it approachable. And I really appreciate you giving me that opportunity today, Kevin.
Yeah. It is something that's, there's not necessarily a class on this, right? You're not going to go through a three credit class to figure out how do you find an opportunity coming out of college or university. And I think in some cases there are abbreviated sessions like that, right? But you typically don't get to practice, and you don't get to really try the things that are scary to start out with. And I love the fact that we began in a place where you were like, hey, let's figure out what you really like. Let's tap into what you're asking AI about. Let's figure out what you think you might want to do, because it is so hard to figure out what you actually want to do. And there are so many different dynamics at play, right? With, well, if I choose this career, can I do this for the next 60 years? You don't have to do it for 60 years. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely.
How do you figure out what that first job should look like?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I know everyone's heard the stat, Gen Z is going to have 30 jobs over the course of their lives, whatever. Who knows if Social Security will even be around in the future?
Exactly. Yeah.
The reality is that what's behind that stat, or what's not even included in that stat, is the idea that that's actually a really good thing for us as humans. The idea that for 99.9% of human history, we were farmers or doctors or lawyers, and we did that one thing until we died. Mm-hmm. That doesn't give you a lot of chance for growth and evolution as a person. And so I want you to go out there, take that first job, not thinking of it as the forever job, because it's not going to be, but thinking of it as a stepping stone. What can I learn about the world from this job? And most importantly, what can I learn about myself? And even if you hate the job the way that I hated being a kindergarten teacher, that's amazing, because that's one less sort of stone you have to turn over as you hop to the next thing. Mm-hmm. So please, please, please think about yourself as a living, growing organism throughout the course of your career, not someone who's set in stone at age 21.
Mm-hmm. Are there mistakes they can make in that first job?
Yeah, I think that the biggest mistake I would make is basically coming into that job with the same mindset you had in college or maybe the rest of your academic career, which is I am here just to check a box, get a right answer, so to speak, and then just be done with it. When in fact, I think we all know that the reality of work and the reality of life itself is way more nuanced. Mm-hmm. There is no right answer in the working world, which means It's less about just sort of trying to be the person who's always right versus the person who gets to know others, who builds deep relationships, who explores things that are new to them. And so really pushing yourself to see your first job almost as like a grad school degree on top of what you've already learned. That lifelong learning mentality is going to take you way further than let me just get another A+.
Yeah. So you mentioned grad school. And I know for a lot of folks, that is something that can enter into the dynamic of like, well, nobody's responding to me posting for a position, so maybe I should look at grad school, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think grad school is a refuge. It's just a cliche that deserves to die, right? Like,
Okay.
The idea that you would spend not only maybe $100,000 or more of your money or your family's money, and the opportunity cost of anywhere from like 2 to 7 years of your life, depending on the degree. Mm-hmm. Like, that's insane if you're just using it to hide from something. I think the only good reason to go to grad school, and I say this as someone who has a grad degree myself, is because you see a clear connection between who you are, what you want to do in the world, and how that degree gets you there faster. In my particular case, I realized as a kindergarten teacher who wanted to be in Silicon Valley, there weren't a lot of folks who were giving me a chance because I didn't have any of the credentials, any of the signals that I belonged. And just to give you an example, like within a week of landing at my MBA program, all the companies that have been rejecting me for years said, hey, we'll talk to you. Wow. I was the same guy, but I just had those little letters next to my name all of a sudden.
Right.
So that's a good use case. It opens doors. But again, if it's more about just hiding out from reality, I think that's not going to be the highest ROI on either your time or your money.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. In terms of what this looks like for people who are entering into, it's time to find something, time to find a job, making sure that job is something where they're going to be able to either identify a skill or eliminate a skill. Is there kind of like the quick cheat sheet that you would say, here's things to look for in that first position? Like, what are the parts that they should focus on?
I'll give you a very quick rule of thumb. So there's this famous psychologist, Csikszentmihalyi, developed the concept of flow. Okay. It's basically this idea that we all have these moments in our life where we kind of lose track of time. Not because we're inebriated, but because we're so deep in what we're doing. Yep. Yeah, maybe a little inebriation might not hurt either.
Why not? Yeah.
And as a result, we're just basically playing to our strengths, playing to our passions in a way that's natural. We don't have to have extrinsic motivators like, oh, I've got this, really juicy bonus on the line, and that's why I'm doing it. And I think if you can keep a little logbook of that, where you're like, I got home from work at 9:00 tonight, but actually it didn't feel like work. It felt like I was doing the most important stuff I've ever done. That's a key signal. And I want you to take note of that. So now as you're thinking about that next stepping stone, you're not just doing the same things over and over again, but you're actually moving closer and closer to that bullseye of who you really are. And I think flow is sort of that gift from the gods, if you will, reaching down to say, hey, this is something really important about who you are as a person.
That's such a great thought. So, and I would imagine also, especially to the audience we're probably talking to at this point, possibly journaling those days and feelings through whatever AI tool you're using, so that it begins to identify those patterns and points it out for you would be probably even an easier way to do that. Using like a cognitive behavioral therapy type of journal would be kind of fun to also then have it be able to quiz you on, well, this is what you worked on today, and what did you think of this? So I love that in terms of like figuring it out. So we're not necessarily looking for like, I like this logo, I like the color of the company's like logo, I like how many people are there, but really making sure that you're paying attention to how you feel. As you're working.
And can I just say something about that, Kevin? Because I think this is a huge problem with our social media society. And again, not exposing kids to enough different opportunities out there, is we are so prone to brand creep when it comes to jobs. I think we all know about brands in terms of we got to have our Nikes or Adidas or whatever. And that's ridiculous probably too. But I think what's even more deadly than spending too much money on sneakers is spending too many years of our life working for an organization that we hate just because it seems sexy to our friends.
Yep.
And I think the thing that we have to differentiate both as parents and as students is, yes, you may go to a cocktail party someday where someone says, oh, you work at Google, you work at XYZ, and that'll feel good for about 2 seconds. But the 2 seconds of glow that the brand gives you pales in comparison to the 2,000 hours of pain every year you're experiencing in a job that's not right for you. So please just think about the basic calculation. Where do you get the most satisfaction, the most meaning from your work? Not that sort of very quick hit of brand envy that quickly fades away.
Very good point. And also keeping in mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this definitely could be more of a generational thing of past generations, going after the blue chip in terms of having the large, very stable company is something that I think our parents were pretty focused on doing, right? But what they failed to learn in that transaction is that the smaller organization that's starting, that is less well known, you will get a whole lot more autonomy and development through your career because they will require you to do more. So you may broaden out your exposure to have a faster idea of what you want to do than if you were to choose a larger employer because of the name or the stability. So there's trade-offs both ways.
Yeah. And here's 2 key points that your audience may be surprised at. Number 1, our headlines are filled with all the doom and gloom about layoffs.
Yep.
Amazon's doing layoffs, UPS is doing layoffs, Oracle's doing layoffs. Well, guess what all these companies have in common? They are giant blue chip names. And at the same time that they're doing layoffs, guess who's hiring like crazy? Small and medium-sized businesses that you haven't even heard of.
Yes.
So that's the first thing. And that's pretty much historically true. Like if you actually looked at the job creators in this country, it's almost never the giant companies at scale. It's the small companies that together are creating the majority of jobs. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, you might say, Jeremy, you're such a hypocrite. You worked at Google. Now you're telling me I don't have to work at Google. Well, what I didn't tell you is the reason I got that job at Google is I worked at small nonprofits in New York City for 10 years, getting my hands dirty, building up the skills that Google fetishized when they hired me. Oh, Jeremy's really good at data analysis. Jeremy's really good at leading teams. Jeremy's really good at delivering campaigns. Guess what? If I'd gone to Google as a 21-year-old, I would never have done any of those things because I would have been a tiny cog in a giant machine.
Yes.
So please get the experience and then worry about the brands, not the other way around.
Yes. That is a message to both parties, both child and parent at this point, is that the company's not going to matter. As you said, what matters is the experience and the development that they're going to feel when they're there. Excellent. Excellent. In terms of how do they shape that, right? We hear an awful lot about, well, there's a whole bunch of opportunities that are out there, but how do I find the opportunity that really fits me the best? Do you have any insight on that for these folks?
Yeah. So first of all, I think we got to give ourselves a little grace and tear down that pedestal that one dream job is on. Because the first thing you're going to discover when you do these AI analyses that we've talked about is there are a ton of dream jobs. And the only way to know whether they really fit you is by doing them.
Yep.
So stop sort of sitting on the sidelines waiting for this one role to come around when you could be out there learning by doing. Mm-hmm. And then number 2, obviously you only have so many roles even in the course of a Gen Z lifetime. So if you want to expedite the learning, stand on the shoulders of giants, as Sir Isaac Newton once said, which is find those people on the inside. Like there's no reason that you should have a rude awakening on your first day in a new job if you've already talked to 3 people on the inside and you know exactly what it's going to feel like, exactly what to expect. So please build your own crystal ball, not based on AI, but based on the human intelligence of learning from the people who are doing it today.
Yeah. And we kind of started off with this as well, but reaching out to folks to understand what it's like to work there is such a nice tool in terms of not only having somebody now who knows you internally, but also having someone who can share what the culture is like. Because frankly, the learning is there. Typically what people forget about is, am I going to be able to work in this culture? Is it going to fit me? And there's a culture for everybody. So even for the playing extroverts on TV introverts, as I think we both are, that having that experience to figure out okay, if they're going to expect me to stand up in front of 5,000 people every morning and give them an update on what I'm doing, this might be a pretty uncomfortable position for me, or it could be a learning opportunity for me. But get an idea what the culture's like, and build a friend there as well.
Yes.
I love
And I
that.
think here's a really cool thing. Turns out, I would argue, you can read Glassdoor till the cows come home. But first of all, a lot of that stuff is fake. I've had
Yep.
HR teams that have asked me to leave glowing reviews.
Yep.
And number two, I don't think there's one organizational culture as opposed to 10,000 little team cultures. Because the
Yep.
reality is, just like your classroom teacher or professor creates a culture in their lecture hall,
Mm-hmm.
your boss is going to create a culture in their team.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you do a background check on your boss? Like, how do you figure out what's this person's culture like? Well, here's a crazy hack. You can go on LinkedIn and you can look for people who used to work with your boss. Say, show me people who are past employees of this company
Yep.
or who were connected to this person, 2 jobs ago. Find some in with them, maybe a mutual connection, and say, hey, would you ever want to work for this person again? Would you recommend this person as a boss to your own friends or family?
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, you will learn some interesting things in these conversations that could save you a whole lot of pain and a whole lot of therapy down the road.
Very true. Yes, that's a great hack. And it really also helps you to really be prepared for that interview.
Yes.
Why not use the cheat code? Absolutely. Absolutely. This was fun. I really enjoyed this time with you, Jeremy. I appreciate you coming on. I always ask our guests one final question. And I'm excited to ask you and to hear your answer because I think it's going to be amazing. What's your why? What makes you do what you're doing?
Yeah, so this is going to not surprise you, Kevin, but I literally just asked AI this last night. I was uploading all my performance reviews and my LinkedIn recommendations.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing, and this is kind of ironic, even though I sucked as a teacher, and I apologize to all my kindergartners from 20 years ago, the thing that drives me is that love of sharing what I've learned, kind of being a teacher, just in a different context. And so as I've made mistakes myself, as I've screwed up my own career in various ways, I've thought, okay, yeah, this sucked, but how can I help the next generation be a little smarter? So thank you, Kevin, for giving me a chance to leverage my why, which is hopefully helping others learn right alongside me.
I bet it is. I'm sure this has been a great show. Jeremy, how can our folks reach you if they have follow-up questions, or they're that student that needs some help, or they're at the university or college that's like, hey, we need to make some improvements in our career services area. We need to get Jeremy in. How do they reach you?
Yeah, feel free to hit me up on thejobinsiders.com, or as a former LinkedIn alum, I always love that big blue site. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Jeremy, I really appreciate your time. This has been a great show. If you or somebody that you know is in need of some help in terms of career, especially our now very recent graduates coming out, please go ahead and share this podcast with them. Give us 5 stars if you're happy with the show today and you learned something. And also, please make sure that you subscribe. This has been Kevin and Jeremy working together with Careering with Cameron today. And we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.